But as I think all of you know, some of you may be a little bit more aware. And hi, Jackie, good to see you. You're newer coming in, so I just wanted to say hello. We've been going through a bit of a transition with the coalition, and which mostly was sparked by my announcing, I don't know, some months ago that I wasn't that I wanted to transition out of kind of the day-to-day responsibilities of being the coalition coordinator, which has just been the privilege of a lifetime. So it is in no way a negative, but it just felt like time after 4 years. And honestly, and I'll say a little bit more, but I actually think at some point it was holding us back. I don't mean that in some grand way, but as always, things are kind of in this mixed bag. I don't know what is wrong with my mouth today. A mixed bag. Anyway, however, as everything with the coalition, we have never been particularly traditional in that many ways. So our transition, it makes sense that it's not any more traditional than anything else. But by way of setting it up, I actually want to read the opening of a presentation that I recently made at Alzheimer's Europe conference in Geneva. And the overall presentation was on creating a new conversation about the myths of dementia. But the one that I'm particularly, one of the ones that I kind of chose two, and the one that I'm going to say something about or share what I actually said was the myth of where innovation comes from. So that's what I'm responding to. As I say, and I do so, look at the myth of innovation, because if our efforts to innovate are to be meaningful and transformative, they must include a genuine embrace of those who are and have been for decades creating radically humanizing and effective approaches to dementia and to life. We all know that dementia is serious business. However, it's not clear that given the world in which we're now living, the conversations we're having about what to do are as serious as we need them to be. Why? Because we're still funding, spotlighting, and reframing the same inadequate solutions while relegating the most creative and groundbreaking approaches to the fringe, barely tapped or discussed. But contrary to popular belief, the fringe is where all innovation begins. As a decades-long and very proud fringe dweller, I agree with Albert Einstein that, quote, we cannot solve our problems using the same ideas that got us here. Our profoundly uncertain world demands new approaches that allow us to meaningfully transform the mistaken and deeply harmful belief in a biologically based, problem-centered, and individualistic understanding of distress and illness. We need approaches that embrace diagnosis not as truth, but as an opening for possibility and creativity. Fortunately, these approaches, including ones I've helped to create and proudly practice, do exist. So now this is me talking. That's a bit of what I said there. And I mean, and one of the reasons I know that these approaches exist, and there's a whole bunch of incredibly creative and effective and humanizing and innovative approaches that fly under the radar, because if they didn't exist, the coalition wouldn't exist. I mean, we didn't come into being to jumpstart all of those things. We came into being, and we came into being at the moment of, and I think to be sure that COVID and all that was going on that summer, which was a summer of extraordinary upset and uprise, it provided an opening, and provided an opening unlike any that I'd seen in a while. So, and to our credit, we stepped through it. But we stepped through it as the creative people that we are, because we were ready and I think able to say, yes, we have much more to offer than we are currently being asked to do, expected to do, funded to do, supported to do, fill in the blank. And to be sure, I think, and this is my belief, and none of this, by the way, you have to agree. Feel free you to 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 disagree. However, I do think we've had a modest impact. Now, I think a lot of things have happened, and I do think there is a modest shift in how dementia, broadly speaking, is being portrayed, is being seen, is being talked about. And again, these sometimes you've got to like look very carefully to see shifts. This is not, there is nothing earth-shattering going on. However, I do think there is a move and a general kind of orientation. I think, slightly speaking, where it's being portrayed more positively, more creatively. I think there has been. I think many people are just much more open about it. I mean, I've seen much more about dementia in the last few years than I'd seen. Or now maybe it's because now I'm in this field, but I don't remember seeing the kind of just if only if we only go by the quantitative um, numbers. I think there's a lot more of a conversation. Um, So it's a new moment. It's also a new moment because we're just not in COVID anymore. Well, sorry, we are in COVID. People are getting every day somebody tells me they've just been diagnosed. So I don't mean that's disappeared, but we're not in the COVID era that had such a profound and unsettling impact on all of us. And and in some ways, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, we've reestablished some sense of normalcy, and that itself is always a challenge. But it is a new moment. And in some ways, I think this transition probably represents, well, what do we want to do in this moment? What can we do in this moment? What makes sense to do in this moment? But whatever it is, we kind of come to answer your question, yes, Linda, the coalition began during COVID. I was one of the co-founders, and a colleague a colleague of mine, Dr. Masad, who has since passed away. She and I kind of issued a call, in part because we were at like many people across the world, we were deeply upset and disturbed by what we were seeing and the impact of COVID, particularly in nursing homes and institutions. So we put out a call, particularly to the very creative, innovative people we'd been meeting for years before that, because we had been doing other work in the dementia field, and said we need to do something. We need to respond to this. This isn't just another moment. And to long story short, there is our website. We could speak. I would love to speak in more depth if you're interested offline. But long story short, that's how we came into being. That's the coalition launched in September of 2024. Sorry, 2020. And here we are 4 years later. We have about 1,000 members in about 44 or 45 countries. And we've largely, I think, built through, grassroots effort. People hear about us in a whole host of different ways. Some people hear about it from a friend. Some people read about it in a newsletter. It's very grassroots. We're very grassroots. It has always been a grassroots coalition. And our feeling about that was that whatever we were going to do, that generally speaking, change was going to come from the bottom up. And again, in line with how I opened, because that to me is where meaningful change begins. It's not always who carries it through, but it certainly begins there. Oh, great, LinkedIn. LinkedIn actually is a big source as well. So we're looking at this. It's the new moment. And again, in line with what I was just saying, I think wherever we go, we're going to remain grassroots, and however we move forward, our impetus is going to be our members and others who have been the driving force all along. I know I'm the coordinator. I know I get some amount of credit for where we've come to. I appreciate that, but it's simply not true that I have been the driving force of this. I think we have been, a lot of our initiatives and almost everything we've done actually have been driven by very organically by people who say, okay, we want to do something, so let's, and then we've given shape to some things. And that, in some sense, is probably the theme of the rest of what I'm going to say. Because, and again, I think, and again, this, I'm not going to try to get too deep into the weeds. Not everyone is interested in hearing all that's going on. But I think what this transition process has helped me to do is realize that the issue is far less about whether we can find someone to replace me. I'm not underestimating myself. Again, I played a role. I don't want to diminish that. However, at one, it's not clear we have anyone, and two, I'm not even sure that would be the best way forward. So as I've kind of gone through this, and I've been talking to a lot of you, a lot of members, that in some sense it's gotten me more connected to, because for those of you who don't know me as well, I've talked in more depth to some of you. My background, I am passionate about being a community builder. I'm a community organizer. I bring people together. I love to create conversations, new kinds of conversations, go where we've never gone before. I love that. And that's what I'm pretty much planning to continue to do, because even in wanting to move out of the day-to-day role, I think I made it clear all along, I'm not leaving the coalition, in part because to me, the coalition, I want to be careful. I don't equate the coalition with reimagining dementia. We were all reimagining dementia well before we got here. You probably were, Linda, in your way, Sandy, Michael. We were doing that in whatever ways we could. Again, the coalition tapped into that in a particular way. I think we galvanized. I think we've made this creative wing of the dementia conversation more visible. I think that's helped. I think it's supported our members. I think it has had a broader impact. But even if we were to disappear tomorrow, we'd continue to reimagine dementia. Like nobody is going anywhere. Would it be as fun or possibly as supported? I don't know. We might come up with something completely different, but for now we're here. And I love working with members. I probably talk to all of you by phone and if I haven't, I would love to. I'd love to learn more about people, the work they're doing. And that's what I plan to continue doing. And I think what I've gotten clear on in this process is that's my passion. It's not everyone else's, and that's fine. In fact, I think this comes back to what I was saying about, I think sometimes my wanting to do that, and I can fall, and I'm guilty of this as well. So I'm not, this is not a criticism of anyone. It's just that I think sometimes that probably has over-determined what it is we focused on. I don't think it's been terribly, I don't think that that's the worst thing that possibly has happened. Maybe that's what we had to do in the first 4 years. But I think it's prevented or maybe made it harder for others who have different passions, whose passion is relative to research or care or community building in another way or whatever it is, of saying, okay, how do I want to grab the coalition and use that to build and to create some new conversations wherever I'm at? And that could be a geographic location, that could be an institutional location, that could be within a field. Keith, who many of you don't know, but he's just an incredible designer. He's just done wonderful work relative to trying to transform and creatively transform with much beauty and compassion and love the environments in which our people living with dementia are living. He has enormous, and I am always, what I know about design could fit into a thimble. But I love having conversations, I think, and he has somebody who has really, I think, kind of in a funny kind of way, used the coalition well to advance his position and the conversations he can have within his communities. And so that's what I hope to nurture going forward. Because in some ways, I think if that isn't happening, I don't mean any of this direly. I just think it limits. I think the strength of the coalition is us. Our reaching people, whether it's on LinkedIn or wherever we're reaching people, is us. None of this has happened because somebody on high has, wow, this is great. We're going to give you $1 million, or, New York Times headlines or whatever. So it's us. And that's not putting any pressure on anyone. Some people don't want to do anything except be a wonderfully supported member. Or maybe you just love the idea that we're here. Or maybe you share it in conversations with people, and that's fine. But I think it is a little more self-consciously saying, hey, we could be doing a lot more, and it has to be generated from the bottom up as well. Because that's where the creative energy comes from. I'll be honest with you. I am not the most creative person in the whole world. That is, I don't pretend to be. They're infinitely more creative. However, I think I'm very good at taking, I think I have a lot of strength in taking the enthusiasm or the passions or the ideas of others, and then figuring out, okay, how can we come together and do something with that? But without that energy and feedback and those ideas, eventually I am just boring as crap, and I'm beginning to bore myself. So it's, I really want there to be, I think we could seize this moment to just bring this to whole new life and do some interesting new things, large, small, in between, whatever. The one thing that, and this would mean like the coalition hasn't, I mean, the two primary initiatives that we've done that I suppose you could say came from, if you will, the top, although even that's a little distortive, were the original song. And by the way, if you haven't seen it, watch it and use it. It is a great video by way of introducing people to just a new way of seeing dementia. The original song and video we did called Let's Reimagine. I call it our musical call to action, which launched in 2022, and then over the last 2 years, and some of you have participated. Hopefully, you all at least know about it. Taking it to the streets, which was our effort to support members and others. You don't have to be a member to do this. To go out and speak to strangers, to find creative, fun, doable ways to introduce, to let people know there is a whole movement to reimagine dementia, that what they've generally learned about dementia is simply not true or helpful, that there's other ways of going about it. There are, again, a lot of people who are and have been, as I said in my talk at Alzheimer's Europe, have been doing this for a long time, and they're actually affecting people's lives, which is why I mean, this is only me. I am slightly irritated that millions of dollars gets invested in things that might happen. And again, I'm all for things happening, all for science, but you'd think we could maybe bring out $1 million of that and invest it in things that are actually happening, that are actually helping people live and thrive in dementia, that are actually creating community and in engaging the kind of isolation that I believe doesn't have to happen. So, but that's me. What can you do? Maybe we'll get there one day. And maybe that's, maybe this new opening will help produce that. But just to close, so that's, in a way, that's what the offer I'm giving to all of our members, including obviously the ones who showed up today and who will show up the next 2 days. And the thing that it will have an impact on are these member gatherings, which I think have been wonderful. I mean, I love them. And from what I hear back, I think they've been very important. They're the one thing I think people often talk about. Again, I want them to happen. However, I have, well before I even began to entertain how do I want to be living my life now and being involved in the coalition, I thought they had to be more member driven and member designed. Because they're member gatherings. They're not Mary's gatherings that members come to. And again, they just need more creative energy. They need leadership. And as much as I love them, the thing I'm clear on is I can't make them happen in the same ways that I did. It doesn't mean they can't. They're not. It's not. I think they're imminently doable. Um, and I think we need some folks to step up in whatever ways it can and say, okay, I want to be part of making sure these happen, designing them, getting input, whatever it looks like. And it's not, again, it's not. I think the work can be as big or as small as you make it. I don't think it's a matter of you have to spend hours and hours and hours on it. I just more think it's a kind of creative activity that and I think the larger the group, the better, that was really inputting on it. But in line with that, and I really will close with this, I also think, and this is mine, I think there are a trillion conversations that the coalition is uniquely suited to create, host, whatever. That, and now going back to my remarks at the Alzheimer's Europe conference, that not only introduce the work of some very wonderful people, all of you included, but help to advance and to continue to thrust, if you will, the power of creativity and other alternative humanistic approaches much more fully into the overall conversation. I think we remain, I think, to kind of move a little bit more from the fringe and try to impact the much broader conversation in all areas. So, for example, I mean, I've been speaking to people, we've long wanted to create a conversation, a new kind of conversation within the medical profession, and see if we could actually create a humanizing conversation about how might we work together as people living with dementia, people impacted by dementia, and those in the medical profession who I think are deeply caring, but terribly limited in how they know how to respond to this. That's just one. I think there are all kinds of conversations to have about what is creativity. I think we all differ about what we think creativity is, but why do we think it would, or do we think it would be important? Do we think that it's integral to impacting in substantive ways on the dementia? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I was just, and this was in another context, but it was a conference that I've helped to produce for many, many years, not having anything to do with the coalition, but where I created or hosted a conversation with two of our members. Okay, goodbye. We'll see you on Thursday, Sandy. That was called Creating a New Performance of Faith, what dementia has taught us about hope. Gosh, am I going to remember it? Hope, something and power. Sorry, I should have had it in front of me. But it was an incredible conversation, and I wouldn't have known the two participants, both of whom are religious leaders, faith leaders, if the coalition didn't exist. So, and I know there are many more conversations out there that could take us to some new places. But again, they're going to have to come from many, many different sources, or you saying, or you all meeting each other and saying, wow, this is interesting. And I want to be of support to that in whatever ways I can. I want to be support member gatherings in whatever I can. I'm just not able to, play the same role. But I think I think I'm a very good supporter, and I know how to, and I can work with people. So anyway, that's a little bit of where we're at. I'm very happy with where we are. However, there's a lot of unknowns. We might bumble along and to kind of go through this and see what next year will bring. But we're not, in that sense, dramatically speaking, we're not going anywhere because none of us are leaving Reimagining Dementia, both the coalition and the activity. So anyway, so why don't we just open it up? And again, feel free to respond, share what's inspired you, what makes you totally confused, what have you been thinking about? Are there conversations you'd like to be having? Is there ways you would like to be, whatever you want to talk about? And if you don't want to talk about anything and just want to get to know each other, that's cool too.
Mary, I just want to thank you for all that you've done over the past 4 years. 4 years? 3 years? 4 years. To gather this amazing coalition across the globe. Uh, and inspiring us to come together, and sometimes hurting us because sometimes it's hurting cats. But I want to thank you for that.
Okay. Well, maybe part of the things, and I appreciate it. I really do. Again, this has been just, it's a labor of love. So, um, but maybe you can share a little bit about, because you and I have been having some conversations. So maybe you can share a little bit, but just broadly speaking, where your area of passion is, how you're recreating, reimagining dementia, and then perhaps a little bit about the conversations we've begun to have, which I have a feeling more people would be interested in.
I'd be delighted. So, I run an organization called Arts Philadelphia, which is essentially a community-driven organization that uses the vehicle of interactions around arts and culture to help people living with dementia and their families and friends and care partners rebuild their sense of community. And one of the things, I mean, we do programs on the ground, but we also have an educational mission, and that's what Mary and I have been talking about. We started a program 8 years ago in which people living with dementia and their care partners mentor the future healthcare providers of at least the Philadelphia area. And Peter, it's great to see you here. And one of the things that is certainly my passion is to find ways in which people with dementia and their care partners can be put or can be offered the opportunity to be back in the driver's seat. And particularly with regard to the healthcare community, and how can we change the kinds of relationships that people with dementia and their families have with healthcare providers, by listening to the voices and experiences of people with dementia and their care partners. So Mary and I have been talking about that.
Actually, I just want to acknowledge, Gordon wrote something in the chat. He said, which is actually, I like it better than the Einstein quote. If stupidity got us into this mess, maybe it can get us out. Which seems to be a quote on a pencil. So there you go. Wisdom comes from everywhere. And I think that and as long as I never view stupidity as the opposite of knowing. One could argue it's our insistence on thinking we know everything that's got us into this mess. So if stupidity, I'm fine with stupidity. Right now, we could use a lot more people willing to be stupid than insisting that they know what's going on and they know how to fix it. Believe me.
So, can I? Hi there. I'm driving. Is it okay to speak now?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, as you know, Mary, well, first, gratitude is you're just done an amazing job, and thank you. And it's exciting to be part of a transition. As you say, we're in a kind of post-COVID environment. Yeah. There are three things I want to say besides expressing my gratitude. The first is the field of dementia itself. That's to say, the mainstream field has changed dramatically, even in 4 years.
Mhm.
The drive to find a cure, the controversies around the drugs. Some of you may have seen the New York Times article recently about the safety issues that are being neglected. So somehow one of the factors that our group needs to address is how does the growing, I'm going to call it dementia. That's what we call it in American dementia. It's not stupidity. Sometimes it's actually very strategic, particularly when led by the profit motive. But somehow we need to be sure to see that the mainstream has changed and they're in trouble. How we react to that, I'm not sure. The other is, in my opinion, the replacement for COVID is climate change, which is a much bigger problem and is only going to get worse. And what I have said many times, the greatest threat to the quality of life of people with dementia and their caregivers and all of us is climate change. It is because the heat and the air pollution are not only going to increase brain health problems chronically, but also acutely with heat waves and droughts and other things. So to my mind, getting a handle around the bigger picture in which you're trying to get us to imagine, as I hear you speak, which is a world in which the climate is changing. Then I guess the last thing I'm going to say, I have increasingly been working in a kind of abstract way of thinking about how art changes culture. It's really important, all the practical work and the play and the joy that the programs that are represented here do. But it's also important for us to give a little thought as to how do artists, in their multiply diverse ways, but somehow with a commonality, lead culture change. Science doesn't, technology sometimes leads, but art often is the place where the ethics and the beauty and the things interface. So those are my three comments. Watching what's happening in the mainstream, looking at climate change, and thinking deeply about the role of art and play in ways perhaps we haven't yet. And I'm going to mute now because I'm timing again. Thanks.
Thank you. I agree. I think all three. And in a way, just building up, and I think in some ways what this, if I were to say anything about where I would love to see members playing more of a role, and again, I don't think it's an issue of time. We're not asking anyone to, we're all busy. That's the bottom line. We all do things where none of us is sitting around twiddling our thumbs. And I think, like, I would love to bring together more of a conversation about the impact of climate change and all kinds of things. I mean, I think climate change, obviously, it's an existential issue for everyone. I would love to create the conversations with, I think we could create some genuinely new openings and conversations. The role of artists and creatives. I mean, again, I would like to think that's been at the heart of everything that we're doing with the coalition, of attempting to express to the world, hey, this is what creative leadership looks like. I don't think it's just in the realm of artists and creatives. I very much want them to be a part of it. They have invaluable leadership and skills to add. However, I don't think creativity and in the ways transformative creativity is simply in that realm. So I want to keep building that. And we need to be introduced to people, bring us together. Like to say I'm just one person, but we could be doing all kinds of collaborations with institutions, and as long as people want to make sure that creativity as both a leadership force, as a social transformation force, and as a day-to-day imperative for just living, I think we have a lot to offer. And that's not, as I said in my opening remarks, it's not a part of a lot of the day-to-day conversation of dementia. So many things are not a part. It just, again, which I think reflects perhaps the bias that once you're diagnosed with dementia, suddenly all your life needs and interests disappear. Like all you have to focus on is care. And again, I'm all for people getting good care. Don't get me wrong. but we're complex people, and people living with dementia are no less complex. We have a lot of needs and desires and differences. I'd love to see those expressed more fully.
Mary, I'm just going to jump in quickly.
Yeah.
Because so much of what you're saying is just sparking everything that we do or what guides us. And what we, for the past, gosh, since 2015, we went into a care home and started working around this theme and working with the time slips model, started by totally forgot her name. Slipped out of my head.
And based
Anne Basting, thank you. And so just being introduced to different models and ways of thinking, and like there's so much, like sometimes it is rolling this mushy ball up a hill because that stigma is still very prevalent. And I talk to especially younger people who are worried about their parents who are, as soon as they get diagnosed, and they could be in their early 60s, there's this, it's almost like a door closes still. And there has to be a continuation of opening of possibilities. So in my world, working with the all ages, we work with groups of all ages, and so we bring people in. Like for example, we're going to work with young 20-somethings that are developing our new anti-fashion cabaret. And one of the things she said, or the young persons who was going to, Molly, who is I've gifted, said, how are we going to lead this? She's like, well, we have to bring in the elderly. I want to see them walking. I want to see them adding to this beautiful runway show that you wouldn't necessarily see people, and that opens up conversation. But going back to the stigma, there, I feel like the work that we've done, we've worked a lot with people who have shown us that we're with the living with the experience, and some have passed on, but they have literally shaped who I am. And that's something that our organization is trying to, like, how do we show that constant shaping that this person, these people have gifted us. It's really a gift.
Yeah.
And that's the story to be told. And so that's where theater, and that's where the artistic realm, video, they're just gathering and talking about that in maybe 2-minute segments, where how did this person, how did these people, when I say these people, there was a group of us, shape you today. And that could be shared out as a collation. And I could tell 1,000 stories about how I was shaped. And just to give an example, this one woman, she's passed on now, but she had Lewy bodies, Gare disease, as well as the dementia. But because I think the dementia gave her a softness of the fear of what was happening. And and of course her husband really helped her there. He was also an artist, and she was like a guide in a way. And so this guide into this world, and that has just impacted me tremendously. So I'll just leave it with you all.
Yeah. Thank you. Speaking of new conversation, Lynn, I'm going to put you on the spot. So, rise to the occasion.
Go for it.
Well, no, I always said this is, but since we're talking in a way about creating some new kind of conversations, could you just share a little bit about the creating a new performance of faith conversation that, I mean, I had the honor of being part of. I hosted a conversation with Lynn and Jay McDaniel, both of whom are faith leaders. It was called Creating a New Performance of Faith. And I don't remember the title because I just don't remember, because we create very long titles. And really how dementia has so influenced their work, a la what Sandy was saying. So I just think to me, it was a fascinating, and it deeply moved the people who heard it, but maybe you could just share a little bit about what it was like for you in that conversation.
Well, I think first of all, I just resonate with Sandy, exactly what you're saying, Sandy. Part of the conversation, as I recall it, Mary, and you'll have to fill in the details, but was this idea of, being present to the ways that dementia and people living with dementia have made me a better pastor, a better minister. And that really the faith communities I've been in, and really the community writ large, is made diminished without people's presence. So it's not just a matter of like we're helping them, which is often the first step out of we don't see them, is we're helping them. And it's sort of this charity model to more of a right relation model of justice and mutually seeing and benefiting. And so, Mary, when you said your remarks that you just shared with us at the beginning, you said something about, can you reread the line about, you said dementia and life?
Oh, that what I was basically saying that over the last, there are people that have for many, many years created new approaches to now I should read it because I don't know why. I think I can just hold on, just give me a second. Oh gosh, well, basically I was just saying that approaches that that provide people a new way of living with dementia, but also how to be much more creative in their lives, continuing to grow their lives. And in a way, I think it's in line with what you are saying, that dementia for me is not separated from living. Where you can't separate out people living with dementia, a la what Peter was saying. Nobody, not among us, is living in a bubble. Living in a world, and we're living.
And I think, oh, I'm sorry, Mary.
Oh, no, go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, I think that to me maybe hits at the heart of this group, is that we're not, I know we've all been in so many workshops and meetings where it's about like diagnoses and this particular like very narrow sort of healthcare. And here it's like we add that and life piece. It's much bigger. And so my journey with ministry, I started on a dementia unit and then moved into a minister of older adults at a church. And now I'm the senior pastor of all ages and dementia is still there concretely, but it's the and life piece. Like, what does this mean for us in our life and our community, and how to build up communities that are gentle to all forms of a difference and illness. So those are the questions I just.
Could I jump in again to just say what you're saying the way I would say it's slightly different.
Peter, just say
Yes,
it briefly because I just want to make sure others have a chance before we go. But yes, please go for it.
So when we label somebody with dementia, we label somebody else as a caregiver, and that is part of the problem, because the true nature of life is caring for others. So we have to, as part of this process, find places for people with dementia to contribute to community in a caring way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's helpful and it's just both lovely and helpful what you're saying, and Peter, that it just hit me that if we're care partners, then doesn't a partnership imply that everyone is involved in creating the care? And I'm struck, Lynn, because I think what you were saying is so true, that it just, and what Peter said, just if it's about living, I mean, if it's about dementia, the care model very quickly goes one way. and it becomes focused on, and that's generally true of the patient, the client. I'm not picking on dementia in that way. But if you're embracing living, then that becomes everyone involved in how are we going to live? How do we want to care? Is the kind of caring we do the most caring thing we can do? I don't know. I'm not, again, it's not a criticism. It's just, hey, I love that we're opening up those questions. Thank you. Others? But by the way, I forgot to say, I have a hard end at 12 because I have to jump onto a work meeting. So we will probably end about a minute or so before, just because I have to use the same Zoom just to be practical, but we have some time. So let's continue the conversation.
Well, I'll jump in. So, hi, everybody. My name's Michelle, and this conversation is really up my alley. Like many of you, I'm an artist and I'm an art therapist, a gerontologist, and a forest therapy guide. So, what I do and what I feel really passionate about is kind of what Sandy and Susan, you've all been touching on, which is bringing people together and kind of normalizing that we're all different and we're all the same, right? Like when we start seeing ourselves in each other, our compassion grows, and our we kind of view, like for me, my lens sort of shifts, and then also what Peter was saying, that expression about insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Well, you're right, Mary. Like that's what we're doing, is creating these same models of care, packaging them up in a beautiful way, and then saying, buy in, right? But it's the same thing. It's still medicalized perspective of dementia. And so when I think about this coalition and what each one of us are doing, and I have a not-for-profit where I approach this as well through the arts and nature, how can we get the word out? Like we know, I think it was you, Sandy, that said, like people still have emotion, right? When people are living with dementia, they still have emotion. We all have emotion. And so we kind of have this medicalized view that, well, we need psychotherapy or we need medical pills. But what about this utilizing the arts as another way of communication and expression? It could be so revolutionary, right? It's so simple and so innovative that, people don't know what they don't know, right? When we look at the way senior living is, for example, people don't know to expect or demand even when they go to a place. Well, how are you utilizing the arts? It's just not part of it. It's like, well, how are you caring? How are you keeping them safe? What kind of doctor do you have? Which is great, but we could do so much more. And so I would love somehow, I'm kind of going on a tangent, y'all, sorry. But how can we utilize this group, this coalition, and what we're all doing to kind of reframe this medicalized focus? I mean, strategically, like reaching out to neurologists or doctors, or I don't know, but I feel like the people that need to hear us aren't hearing us. I don't know if that makes sense.
I would love to respond. Someone else starting to talk.
All right, go ahead, Peg.
I'm in Massachusetts, and I'd love to respond because I feel like my worldview just got expanded by hearing everyone here talking about their work and talking about, what you've learned and how you're looking at this issue of dementia. Mary, you started by saying you gave a talk creating a new conversation about the myths of dementia at that big conference, and as I'm listening, I'm just feeling like everything everyone has just said is about, can we have a creating a new conversation series? Could we do that as a collective? Because some people have talked about the role art could play in changing the conversation. Mary, you've talked about radically humanizing our approaches, because I feel like the work I've done with individuals with dementia, it's changed my life, and it's our common humanity. I've grown and needed them as an ally as much as they might have needed me as an ally. So there's been a lot of growth and development through that. But I just gave a workshop to this group of 70 healthcare professionals like social workers and OTs, and I was talking so much about the myths and how we need to debunk the myths. These are the myths. And then here from the lived experience, we see people flourishing at moments, and art and culture being a beautiful tapestry of the human experience. So I just wonder, how could we create a new conversation series around everything people are talking about? Is that an idea? Telling the stories that are untold, that all flourishing is mutual, whatever these things are that we know, or at least we don't know, but we're learning.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I think what we have come to learn is would blow many people away. Just where we are now, but I don't even mean I would love for us to extend further. It occurred to me that there's a relationship between what you were saying and what Michelle's saying about hearing the people who need to hear us aren't hearing us. I'm not convinced that the way things are going now, and by those people, I assume you mean the people of influence and the people who are kind of officially shaping this, I think that in a way, for me, the reason I always put creating a new conversation about, and whatever the topics that fall, I don't care if it's jumping rope. I don't really care what. I mean, is because in a way, for me at least, the focus has to be on how do we create environments in which we even have a shot at hearing each other. And forget for a moment the people on top. I don't know that they want to hear anything right now. I don't think it's that suddenly they don't have the same ears we do, or they're not, or that they don't know we exist. I don't think that's true. I think they hear in the ways that we all hear, relative to what works for them and I don't know that we're that useful to them right now. On the other hand, I'm saying that because I would just like to make a friendly amendment to what you're saying, Michelle, and add that we all need to get infinitely better at creating environments for listening in ways that build together. And so I want to add that to the mix because I think there is a real relationship, and that's why I'm enthusiastic about creating new conversations and a shared commitment to them being genuinely new and creative with whatever we can have. I think that would give us a better shot at, if you will, perhaps having the people. I think there's a lot of folks between us and the top who also need to hear us. And the more of those people we can hear, I think we have a better shot at influencing than whoever is, however you want to call them, the powers that be. I'm not interested in getting terribly political, but you know what I mean? There is a relationship between creating a new conversation and being able to hear each other. Because as somebody was pointing out before, a lot of the ways we know how to care or be with don't count heavily on hearing each other. We kind of bring in a set of assumptions on what's good and necessary and needed, and then kind of fumble from there. And we fumble beautifully. I have a soft spot for the extent to which we, as a human species, fumble. But there's a lot of work that we could do, and I would love for us to be more in part of shaping that. So I applaud Peggy and Michelle, what you're both saying. Others. Or again, feel free to say no, but I'm really not. Unlike with Lynn, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but Lynn, I've known for a long time. But I'm just curious, as someone who is newer to this, but also if nothing else, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're involved with and what your journey has been. But kind of also just what, if anything, you're hearing. And again, there's no right answer. You do not.
Did you address that to me?
Yes, Laurie, sorry.
I thought,
Oh,
no,
you're
that's
the one.
okay. I thought,
That's okay.
I thought I heard that, but I was just being sure. So I'm an end-of-life doula, and I see dementia really at all stages, but the dying phase the difficulty of kind of getting on hospice because they don't meet certain criteria. So my role, I am new to
Mhm.
the world of dementia, been getting a lot of training to learn more. And like the more I learn, the more I feel passionate about helping families. Because there are some resources, but maybe they don't know about them, or they don't know the kind of care that their loved one needs. They don't know, how they have to change along with their loved one to sort of communicate better, not arguing with
Mhm.
something that is actually wrong, but to that person is very real. So I'm not really sure exactly how I would fit into this, but I'm really eager to, continue and see what that comes to, and also like learning really from everyone else
Yeah.
too. Definitely as a doula, I do work with end of life, but I also work with people at like a lot of stages. So
Mhm.
my hope is again to be able to communicate, to help the family, but also get out in the community and do
Yeah.
some training, some workshops, some informational sessions, to not just like get myself out there so that they know there's someone who can help, but also just that there's more opportunity for
Mhm.
people to learn, from someone who knows
Mhm.
more and can support, you know,
Yeah.
them with their diagnosis at
Yeah.
any stage. A lot of emotional support for the family and the individual as they're,
Yeah.
understanding their diagnosis or seeing how it's affecting them. So I don't know if that helps.
Oh, it does
But
enormously. And by the way, you fit right in here.
yeah.
However, just to say, because we have a number of doulas, end of life doulas, as
Oh,
part
you
of what
do? Okay.
one I would love to. And so since we're on the topic of creating new kinds of conversation, I would love to create a new conversation about death and dying.
Mm-hmm.
I just
Yeah.
think and I have enormous respect for doulas and hospice, and they've taught me so much
Mhm.
to kind of just, I don't know, rid ourselves of our blinders and how we've been, I think
Yeah.
death and dying is as stigmatized and narrow as anything else.
Mhm.
Um, and so I would love for us to have that conversation. I think it's huge. I mean, I once did, this was
Yeah.
for a different organization in a different context, but um, it, it is part of a series where we were talking about working with people and creating humor in their lives. Kind of, could we do that? And one of the sessions that workshops that I will remember to this day was called "What's So Funny About Death and Dying?"
Mhm.
And it was the most wonderfully playful, emotional, impactful conversation I've ever had. Because again, I think however we were able to do it, and and it was a large group, just were able to play with it, to go to some new places, and I
Yeah.
think in that interesting way, freed up to be even more emotional in ways that were giving and not kind of repressed. And so I would I would put that high on the list, I think, for everyone. I mean, we talk
Yeah.
about living, but dying is a part of living.
Well, exactly. And just to reframe that conversation and with dementia as, yes, it is an end of life diagnosis technically, right?
Yes.
People die unless they die. And there's this time now, between now and then that like, how can we improve the quality of life for everyone involved? Obviously the person who's affected, but also their family and friends, because it does affect everyone. And to reframe like, you know, living now and what's the best way we can until then. So yeah, there's a lot of fear in talking about death and dying. So I'm with you on being able to open up that
I agree.
conversation.
And
Yeah.
again, just a friendly amendment. I think if we were able to involve people of all ages, I don't care how healthy or not, in just a reimagined conversation about death and dying, everybody's quality of life would improve.
Yeah.
I mean, I think our quality of life is greatly impacted. I don't care if you're 2 or 102 by how we relate to dying, because it just becomes this, I don't know, this way that we just, I don't know, dodge it. So yes, I want to improve everybody's quality of life. Romeo.
I know we're going to end soon, but just quickly wanted to
No,
mention
please. Yeah.
that so I'm a research associate at Kite Research Institute, University Health Network, which is in Toronto. And it's funny, I was just telling Mary about one study that I'm currently working on is about end of life and people living with dementia. And so, Lori, what you said is really aligned with what we're trying to do. And we're actually involving people living with dementia and family carers and also health professionals and staff. They're involved in the study to get their voices heard, especially people living with dementia, where we've involved them in the community and also in long-term care through arts-based research conversations, which has been really amazing to see. And so really trying to augment their voices and try to get from them what is a good death and what kind of quality of life do they need now, because end of life is really a journey, and it's not just one defined time. And so we're in the middle of doing analysis of this right now, and it's been really been great to hear directly from those groups. And we're also involving we've got a large interdisciplinary team involving people living with dementia, family carers, and professionals, and they've actually been involved in our analysis process. So they've been reading transcripts, and some of the people living with dementia care partners, they've been involved in some of the conversations as well, in leading those. So it's been a great process, and our goal is to actually create 1 or 2 short documentary films, because we want to be able to disseminate what we're learning from this. And this is, I want to add, this is in the Canadian context too. So, but I think we can learn a lot from hearing from them directly.
Wonderful. Well, y'all should connect. And if you're interested, we're gonna, Lori, why don't you put, if you're okay with this, why don't you put your email in the chat? We're saving the chats, and I'm gonna get out all the various connections and resources from all 3 meetings, but that way you can at least be assured that you can be connected. And if you're ever interested in being introduced to some of our other end-of-life people, it's a significant part of what we do as a coalition. It was funny. It was very touching. The first meeting, there was a young woman who honestly, I don't remember the kind of work she was involved with, but it was interesting. And she said, I'm alone.
Mm.
And I just, well, one, it breaks my heart that we often work so alone. But I said to her, well, and I would say to all of you, yes, you're alone in the sense that you're doing whatever you're doing. And obviously, in many cases, you're doing, and you're now part of something. So you both are and you aren't. And I really mean that. That's not a hokey phrase for me. And if anything, I'd love to, again, have us just take more advantage of that in whatever way works, whether it's creating a conversation series or just weighing in on or being invited to speak somewhere, or whatever it is. We're not alone, and can we do everything? No, we're modest. But, we have a lot of people and we have access to many more. So we really aren't alone. So I think as part of this, I hope that becomes a shift as well. So we can kind of go, oh, I got some things to play with. So thank you all. Thank you. It's wonderful to see you all. We'll stay in touch. We'll kind of see where we go from here. And then there will be more kind of formal things about it. But what a beautiful conversation. Thank you, and have a great rest of your week and weekend.
Thanks for everything, Mary.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mary. Thanks.
Yes, please. And thank you so much, Mary. And I just want to say really quickly, well, my name is Dahi and my pronouns are
Dahi.
they, them, and I am a trans non-binary person living with dementia. And you may hear an American accent because I grew up in Chicago, but because of my gender identity and the horrible state of gender inclusion in the US, Canada, all over Europe and all, now I live in the countryside of Flanders in Belgium, where
Yeah.
thankfully I am receiving gender affirming medical and social care that I deserve, that everyone deserves. And I want to acknowledge Jackie and Helen for the use of their pronouns on screen. That is a hugely welcoming gesture for someone like me. And I can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate that you've made the effort to do that. So I don't want to be grandstanding here or anything, but I want to let you know that I also volunteer as the moderator of it's a research group, and it's totally virtual and totally free. We know free is good. It's called Queering Dementia Research, and it's part of what's it called? The Dementia Research Community, which is a freely downloadable application in both Android and the Macintosh one, Play Store, or whatever it's called, Apple Store. And it is filled intergenerationally and multiculturally with scientists, particularly researchers, but it's really open to anyone who believes in the inclusion of reimagining dementia, and anyone who's interested is welcome. And Mary, it was a pleasure and an honor to meet you at the
Oh,
Geneva conference
well,
recently. Thank
the
you, thank you,
pleasure was
thank you.
mine. Thank you.
Thanks.
And
That's it
if,
for me.
and what I'll do, I mean, if you can share a link or something in chat, please do so. If not, just make sure I get it and I'll make sure everyone gets it as well, because I think it's very, very important and something that's coming up much, much more now. So obviously. Alrighty, Pat.
Mary,
you-
a quick question. Not sure what the guidelines are for y'all's meetings or we all's meetings, but can I send directly to the last speaker my contact information?
You can do whatever you would like.
Okay. All right.
I was trying to think if we had guidelines. Somebody can remind me, but
Sometimes, I mean, I'm in so many self-helping things, like
No.
sometimes you're not supposed to.
Actually use chat to connect with each other.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
please do so. We'd love I think a big part of what we do is actually introduce people to each other. So
Yeah, I've never even talked to anyone firsthand who's been diagnosed, and I can't even say the living with dementia
okay, well,
concept. So
here's somebody I'm going to I don't think I'm putting him on the spot. But Wally is someone to connect with.
yeah, just to normalize it.
Yeah, no, and
if it
well,
can be normal.
I don't know how normal Wally is. He certainly can help you.
Well, yeah, but also I'm interested in the research project because I'm gay.
Yes, please. Oh well, then so now you're in a great place. There are many of us who are LGBTQ. So,
thank you.
Anyway, exchange phone emails or do whatever. That's great. Wonderful. All right, Pat Sullivan.
My husband has been into dementia for 18 years, and he was just put into long-term care. That whole process has practically broken us financially.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, I think 70 or 80% somewhere in there are in my position. And I don't feel comfortable speaking about that here or anywhere else. Like that's right now. I'm looking at the long list of bills we.
Sorry, Pat. Let me interrupt. Could folks go on mute? There's some sound. Sorry, Pat. Go ahead. I just wanted to be able to hear you. So you said you weren't feeling comfortable about sharing this
I am feeling, I have to share
Oh,
it.
you
I'm
are.
part of
Okay.
80% or 70% of people who are in the same position. Most of the people who are dealing with dementia can't afford it.
Mhm.
Can't. Now, we've been able to afford it because I'm a writer and I have 3 books almost done, but John's dementia and all it took to care for him cut into that time to work on him. And we've moved from California, where we loved it, to a very, very, very Republican section of Virginia because my sister lives here.
Mhm.
And it's not happy for us at all.
I'm
And we're
sorry.
not supposed to be unhappy with that. So we face big, big problems. And I don't get much here around that issue at all. It's something that we don't talk about. And Wally, I love seeing you sometimes, and I want to talk to you because you get around. I'm doing everything I can. And then I had a bad state for 3 months where I had a,
Pat, sorry, Pat, I'm going to interrupt. We just need to, if you could just kind of,
yeah, I'm wrapping it
I
up.
just, I'm aware that we have a tight end and there are many other
Yeah.
parts, but why don't you finish off what you were going to say? I mean, it's
Yeah.
very important.
So I had my own kind of version. I don't have dementia, but I have issues around this. I
Mhm.
need help. Where do I go? And I would like to see this group work with that very much.
Mhm. Right, thank you. So others, I'd love to hear how, including some of the people who I haven't seen for a while, just to catch us up on what you're doing. Because I know it's always interesting. Pia, I was going to call on you anyway, so
Yeah, I thought so.
you're right.
So yeah, I guess I've been reflecting on the gatherings and as we, move forward, how these may change. And one of the things that I think would be really helpful, and I think you've already alluded to this, Mary, is to hear more about what people are doing. One of the as one of the co-founding members of the coalition, it was really important to, at the outset, we anticipated that this coalition would help us to forge alliances across countries, across organizations, so that we build more momentum with the work that we're all each doing. But to do that, I think, I just need to know more about what's happening. And so I think that these, gatherings could be a really wonderful opportunity, for those who sign up, come prepared with just a few minutes to say about an initiative that you're working on or that you've done, and then you share that. So I don't know, I that was just something I was thinking about. It sort of came from, in my research institute, we have an annual conference and we have what's called Minute Madness, where each presenter has a minute to share with the audience what it is that they're there to present in order to generate enough interest that people actually come to the presentation. So kind of think about this in the same way. Like, let me take 3 minutes to tell you about what we're doing here in Toronto, share some links, and that may spark collaboration that wouldn't otherwise happen. Just an idea.
No, agree. Well, why don't we practice it now? I always like good ideas. So, I mean, again, people should feel free to share anything you want to share, but why don't we do some Minute Madness? I would love, because I agree with Pia, I think. And we used to in the beginning, and it just, I mean, these were much more elaborate. We had these wonderful performances that we invited people to do to share their work, and they didn't have to be straightforward presentations. They could be singing, dancing, poetry. So maybe that's something to add to the mix as well. But at any rate, please, the floor is open. Share. Let us know who you are, what you're doing.
Mary, I just, Pat, if you could look at your chat or your messages. Can you access that? I just sent you a message about maybe somebody in Metro Detroit that is in the senior services world can direct you to typical services that may be available in your area. They're just a knowledgeable group, and they probably could, if you give me your email address, I can try to connect you with somebody that may be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna request, if you want, and I urge, if you want to be, please be of support to Pat. Put it in the chat, and again, we'll make sure Pat gets it, including, I know somebody suggested GoFundMe, and Pat was saying if somebody can work with her on doing that. But let's do it on chat, because I wanna keep learning, kind of following Pia's lead, kind of learn more about who's in the room, so. And also, just do me, when you come on, say your name, because I find myself wondering where the voice is. It's just embarrassing. So you can save my dignity by just saying who you are.
I'm Paula Dirks, and I find that if you look for the green box, or that tells you where the person speaking is.
I know, but I'm just not that. Believe me, I'm aging, and this is one of the things I just don't do as well. But thank you. I will try. Oh, let's see. Joe, why don't you I know you're new. I'm gonna share a little bit more about your journey and what you do. And
Sure. Thanks, Mary. Yeah, I'm Joe Claxton. I live in Seattle, and I work for an agency called Aging Wisdom, and my director usually comes to these meetings, and she wasn't able to attend, and she asked me if I was interested, and I was like, of course. I just wanted to share a little thing that that I wanted to do with our marketing person who writes little blog articles about dementia. And so there's always talk about food and dementia, about people eating and the kind of issues that can happen. And so I really wanted to do something about that with photos. So I did some photos of food, just that whole idea of simplifying everything, especially because Thanksgiving's coming up. So we sort of took that lens and was like, you know, everyone wants to decorate the table a lot, but just keep it simple, make it so that the conversation is the most important part. Little contrasted color tone bowls with the food in it, just one food item. You can put maybe one decoration near it, but keep it simple. That was just a fun project to do that has been something that that I really wanted to sort of do a project on. So I was really grateful for that opportunity. So
that's wonderful. Could you do maybe 2 sentences? I mean, this is unfair, but a little bit more about Aging Wisdom generally?
Yes, so we're part care management, so that's a big part of it, care managers, but we also have part that is creative engagement, and that's what I do. So often care managers will recommend to a client's family that they seem isolated and could do with engagement. So we try and focus on arts, but if the person's not really an artsy person, then we just try and individually tailor engagement with them. So yeah.
Wonderful. Carmelita, your hand is up.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Mary. And I'm Carmelita Carhoff, and I am in Durham, North Carolina. And I am with Dementia Inclusive, Inc. And we are kind of planning at this point to establish what has been accused as a very audacious goal of bringing 15 sectors across the city and county of Durham to become a dementia inclusive multi-sector volunteer partnership. And the focus of that is all of these 15 sectors have in one way or another something to do with a person living with dementia, be it a lawyer, what can they do for them, be it a hairdresser or a restaurant or a neighbor. And if we bring them all together, we can start focusing on what can we in our own role do to support that person with dementia as a whole human being, not just addressing their needs because of the disease, but addressing their needs as a total person. So the board met last night and started that conversation. And again, like I said, it has been said, are we going to be able to do that? But I guess the only way to start something is to get it started. So we have 3 months to ponder on that and put some plans together. And hopefully it will be a 3-year project. The biggest issue that we have is, of course, we are a fully volunteer-supported, volunteer-based organization. And any support that we have financially to get some background staff is through donations or grants. So that's also another challenge at this point, but that's where we are.
Yes. Well, I think you're in good company here, sadly. I mean, no, I was saying last night, and this is just me, I'm not attributing this to anyone else, but part of why I wanted to make that statement at Alzheimer's Europe about how the fringe gets treated, so to speak, is, I mean, I'm all for, millions and millions and millions of dollars going, but, I don't begrudge anyone money. Well, I do in a few cases, but generally speaking, I don't. And it's a little galling that millions and millions and millions, it's going to something that may or may not ever happen. And again, that's not an argument for not trying. Believe me, I'm all for doing whatever we can. This is a little galling that we couldn't carve out a few mil for research like Pia's doing. And, it's maddening to me that the projects that actually have an on-the-ground impact and whose research or policy is very attentive to the needs of the actual people they're working with, it just often gets left. So I maybe there's a way we could come together to address that, but I certainly hear what you're saying, Carmen. Thanks for letting us know. Others? Okay, I call on to good, Wally, because I was about to call on you.
Hello, my name's Wally. I live with dementia in a family full of dementia and people who've passed before me with dementia. And my goal as a person who has very limited abilities to organize is to, every time I get an opportunity to speak to someone about dementia, I share my journey and that of others that I've met, that the tragedy narrative has its place somewhere in the journey, but it doesn't necessarily need to be used immediately, and that there's a lot of life and a lot of mysteries to still uncover, and that you need to go out and live the best life you can while you're still here. And I live in a rural area, and there's Helen Abel will tell you, she looked into
We lost Helen. Anyway, continue on. I think she just dropped. Oh, maybe I'm frozen. Wait, am I frozen or is Wally frozen?
Wally is frozen, I think. Yeah, Helen had to leave early.
It's fine, but well, hopefully Wally will come back on. Wally?
Am I there?
You were frozen, so
That
you were
figures.
just saying you live in a very rural area.
I live in a rural area, and there's no help up here for people with
All right.
dementia at any stage. It's just tough luck, go home, good luck. We'll see you at the Evergreen Care Facility the next couple of years, make your way. And then, as we know, people are being diagnosed earlier and earlier and earlier, but they're still being treated as though they're just ready to step into eternity next week. So the sort of jettison, cast aside, and on to the next. And so I'm trying to help as best I can in rural areas and with people I meet to overcome the stigma, to speak boldly where no other man has gone before. Oh, wait, that line's been used. But just to tell people that, it's okay.
Oh.
We're all human. We're all going to die someday. And luckily, if you get diagnosed early enough, you got a whole lot of life left to go out and mend fences and build new bridges and to love those that need to be loved and to set an example to your family of courage and dignity in the face of adversity. And that's what I try to share and do with people. That's my gig. Best I can. Thank you.
Well, I was thinking of going where no person has gone before, which made me think about Audacity, which made me think about Carmelita saying that they had an audacious. I mean, I wish we were bigger and better funded in a way. I mean, we can do what we can do. But at a minimum, I want to support us and please use us in whatever we can to help you be more and more audacious. Because if we're not audacious, we're not going to make a dent. It's too confined. I mean, so I'm all for audacity and boldness. And then you create what you can create. It is sometimes we can't do all that we want to do, but that is one of the things I think the coalition can help support and has inspired people to go to some new places and have some new conversations and all of that. Others, we have about, we have some time.
I could go real quick and try and be more concise.
Okay.
So my name is Jackie. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, and my mind is blown by just even hearing things like the tragedy narrative or just anything like that, because I feel like I am in the tragedy narrative. And I'm having a lot of health issues. This is all still so new. I had a friend connect me to Helen, who connected me to this group. So I've just never even had this conversation with people before. I'm not working right now. I left my nonprofit job, a program that I started and ran for 22 years, working with women with health issues, because I didn't know what was going on with me. And I kind of thought I couldn't go back to work. I've got more information and everything, but I think what I wanted to share is while I still have these skills, I have things to share with the group. And, Mary's transition, if people want to step up, we can do facilitation trainings. If people are nervous how to facilitate, it's a perfect environment for people to learn how to facilitate. If there needs to be adaptations in being a facilitator, we experiment and do that. That's the kind of work I did with women who were on the street, and it was a harm reduction program. And, everybody had something going on, mental health, substance use. We even had some women with developmental disabled, all ages. We did policy work. I hate saying past tense, but I want to go back to work, but I would love to share any of that. But I also know that if anyone is out there that wants to chit chat with me once or text me or anything, I really literally have not talked to anyone. I've been a caregiver, but I've literally not talked to anyone where I'm at. And I'm really struggling with all the medical appointments and everything. So that's what I wanted to put out there, and I'll put my contact information in the chat.
Yeah, good. And people be in touch. And thank you for sharing that, because I know it's not easy. And certainly, speaking for the coalition, we'll take you up on your offer to want to do more with us. So
yeah, I write grants
at every level. We can good. No, writing is a huge skill that we could use. Sorry, somebody else, Wally, you wanted to.
I just wanted to say to Jackie that there's a Dementia Action Alliance and Dementia Alliance International. They're both excellent. They have wonderful groups of people who are in early stages of diagnosis and the struggles, and it's a great place to share. But it's also a great place to get a lot of hints. And it's also a great place to share your wisdom with other people. So if you don't feel alone, there's groups out there. I host in a couple of them, and I'm also involved in a bunch of them. But come out and do that. You'll find some connections and some friendships, and you realize that your experience is not unique. This one is, so you're more than welcome.
I'll make sure the two of you connect. In my interval. Margaret. You're on mute, Margaret.
Thanks. I was searching the menu to find the raise hand instruction. And I couldn't find.
Don't worry about raising hands. Just
Anywho, I'm a disability scholar and activist in Toronto, Canada. My main activities are writing and publishing, and what I do to challenge the tragedy narrative is talk to people. On my website, on my email signature, I have resources for living well with dementia. I have an ad for reimagining dementia, inviting people to join. So that's another thing that I do. I'm not a group person, like group organizing, but these are things that anybody can do. It's really offering resources and spreading the word. I'm organizing a lobby table in my own housing cooperative to get people to challenge the dementia stereotypes and write a poem about people who, somebody they know who have dementia. This started from a talk that I gave to students at Trent University in Canada, and trying to spread that idea around, the idea of like working through dementia stereotypes and changing people's minds through using their own relationships. Think about a person with dementia as a whole person. And I find that everybody either has a relative who has dementia or knows of somebody. So there's always a relationship connection there to start with.
Oh,
so that's what I'm doing.
Oh, great. Thank you. It's good to see you again. Seen you in a while.
Very good for networking and meeting. I really enjoy people joining the group and meeting each other and hearing their stories. So I think this is a great function that Reimagining Dementia has, and that's how we've grown, because when people come in and hear about each other and make connections, and Mary, of course, you're an excellent person who works with these connections and people and talk to people as well. That's my contribution.
Thank you, Margaret. Catherine, what have you been up?
Well, hello, everyone. Well, it's funny, Wally, you were talking about rural connections, because that's what I do a lot of advocacy in. I live in a semi-rural area, and I'm really interested in how we can provide really great relationships and care in a rural environment. Because as you know, it's not like a different flavor of urban care. It's a completely different kind of care, a completely different rhythm to people's lives, different relationships. Oh, I'm getting a thumbs up from Pat. So that's what I'm interested in. I work in virtually with different programs. One I'm doing is in Saskatchewan, which is the province next door. And I do phone-based programs. So for a lot of rural people, they don't have great internet access. And so I do phone-based art engagement programs, which is really fun, kind of old school. And then actually in a few minutes, I'm going to jump on a call with a program in Scotland, which is through some friends of mine at the University of Edinburgh. And they are also doing programming for people in rural Scotland. So sort of older adults, people living with neurocognitive change, but in the rural areas of Scotland where it is also hard for them to connect. So that'll be exciting, and yeah, that's my interest. So Wally, I was glad to see you there pop up on my screen.
Actually, we know a lot of our members are in rural areas. I was thinking of somebody I met in Maine who's 99% rural. So maybe there's a broader conversation to have at some point. Just because I agree. I mean, I know there is an urban bias in many of our places, but there's a lot of rural out there. So this is good. Great.
Sign
Oh,
in, Catherine.
also, sorry, Catherine, I'm going to be in touch because I tried to do a phone-based program the other day and I was remarkably inept. So I've got to now learn from people who actually know something about this. So I'm glad you said that. Anyway, we have about 3 more minutes. So let's just get in some final. Wally, sorry.
I gotta go. Thank you, Catherine.
Oh, okay.
Reach out.
Goodbye.
See you.
Justin, why don't you share a little bit about you?
Hello, I think that the reason why I didn't bring it up is some things are transitioning in the work that I'm doing, so I'm unsure of what I'm doing next. But what I have been doing is I'm really interested in supporting families and relationships, and even I'm also even found families, but I'm really interested in this social aspect of creativity and how do we bring people together through creativity and find these connections and ways to build on the strengths that people already have so that we can use strength to further to further build rather than trying to start from the beginning from ground up. And I'm especially working with music and finding, and so we have been developing here in Sheffield, UK, musical tools, just things that are fun and that can have multiple different levels, entry points, that try and get over some of the barriers that people face when trying to be creative. Because so many people are like, oh, I'm not a musician, I'm not this or I'm not that. And so how do we get people past this to have that fun? And yeah.
Yes, that's wonderful. And in hearing, it's been a while since Justin and I spoke, but it's wonderful work. I mean, I loved hearing about it. So learn more about it. All right. We have time for a final sharing. Anyone? Carmelita, you want to add something or?
Yeah, the last thought was as I was listening to Pat and Jackie, what I had forgotten to mention is that we had started caregivers series, and we are on our second set of classes right now, and it's called the Powerful Tools for Caregivers. And I went through training with 2 other volunteers from the University of Iowa and is facilitating the second set of classes. And I have to tell you, Jackie and Pat, that I have not felt that much sentiment for caregivers as I am feeling now. Realize the burden and really starting to understand how much it matters.
Thank you. Huge. All right. I'm going to sign up and thank you all. It's really, really lovely to see you all. And we will continue this conversation. I think we've got some great ideas and input, and we will continue. This is our last gathering of 2024. So if I don't talk to you before, Happy New Year. I know there are a few holidays to get to, but what the heck? I'll just Happy New Year. Who knows? Anyway, it's great to see you all and have a great, great, great rest of your day and week. So, Linda, why don't we start us off?
I'm new to the group, so maybe I'm speaking out of turn.
Please.
Context is I've been retired from being a psychologist for a couple of years. I've been a carer for my mother, who's 94, with a questionable diagnosis of Lewy bodies. What I want to add is that the broader approach, rather than just the medical model and the medication and the treating old people for their physical illness, the mental health side of things, there's some movement, there's research, but the model from the UK in mental health that's an alternative to the medical model is called the Power Threat Meaning Framework. And it's trying to change the way people think about diagnoses. And I wonder whether there's some relevance in terms of the creativity that this group's trying to bring to the focus on dementia rather than just the medical thing. So that's one positive.
Yeah.
Negatives that are being discussed very, very specifically at the moment where I am, are the issues around aged care in retirement, aged care in nursing care, and the money-making ventures that are profit-driven.
Yeah.
And of course, lack of staff and lack of training of staff, which I think is pretty much worldwide, I gather. But the costs are exorbitant. On another positive, there's a movement, I don't know whether this group is part of or familiar with, towards compassionate communities. Is that something that people are familiar with? No?
I think some of us probably are, some of us probably aren't.
Well, it's another model where it's looking at how to build community, and I don't know whether that's relevant to this group. In terms of where you're coming from, Mary, I'm still not clear whether you're looking for someone to host regular meetings, because I don't know whether these meetings have been happening regularly, or whether someone to drive
Yes.
the meetings or to drive the coalition generally. I'm a bit confused. Thank you.
Well, so are we probably. So you probably come in at a transitional moment. Others can answer, just to speak briefly to some of the things that you've said. Yes, the transformation or the move toward a non-diagnostic or challenging the hegemony of diagnosis of how it is. And I also have been a therapist and was a group therapist for much of my life. So personally, I have a deep interest in psychology. I think it plays an equally negative role. So yes, I think we are generally incorporating that into the kind of creative challenges or transformations that we would like to see. I'm sure every member doesn't share that. I'm speaking, if you will, as a coalition as a whole. In terms of the, I think that no, other people could speak to this as well. I think many of our members are directly involved in care, and meaning and are very concerned with institutional care, the kinds of things that you're talking about. And I know there have been various coalitions like 2030 and other things that have begun to try to lead a transformation of institutional care. I think it's very important. It's not particularly been a focus of ours in that kind of direct sense. I think taking it to the streets was motivated in part by our wanting to build more, if you will, an inside-outside coalition, because and I often use the history of in most effective, even healthcare related movements, going all the way back to AIDS or cancer, or even mental health and psychology and the anti-psychiatry movements, all of that. Their success and ultimately their being able to impact on and help transform the mainstream conversation had to do with their ability to reach far outside of their immediate impact group. So, so that, I mean, this is very simplistic, but ultimately that you didn't have to live with AIDS to recognize that and support the AIDS movement. Similarly with cancer, similarly with almost everything has had to win the hearts and minds of the broadest population. So whereas, we are fully supportive of the internal efforts to improve care as a coalition, that's not, our concern is, hey, we've got to build support, a broad a much broader community of support for those very issues if those internal efforts are to be successful. Because right now, institutional care, as you all know, it's very hard to transform. It just is. It's a rigged system. And as much as I mean, my mom who died of dementia was in, I would do anything to transform it. This just happens to be where we kind of landed in terms of how do we do that most effectively. And then in terms of the gatherings, yeah, I mean, I'm going to continue. The things that I'm going to continue to do is, again, I'm going to be which I am currently, so it's, maybe I'll just change my title. I'm the public facing, I'm kind of the public face of the coalition. I'm usually the point person. I would love if that would change. Please volunteer. I can help you grow into those. I mean, we could use a multitude of public facing people. And I'm going to continue to work with our kind of website and social media teams to kind of make sure that we continue to have a presence. Relative to the gatherings, I don't know, it could look a lot of different ways. I think it's probably best if there were a group that was taking responsibility for it. I think it's not a one-person job, and also it just leads to, I think it can just become very difficult. So if there were people who wanted to take responsibility for those meetings taking place and figuring out what do we want to do and kind of play with the design, and I'm happy to work with, because right now at least to have it be a transitional moment. So, and we're not going to say to anybody here, you take this and do it. We'll go through that process. So in a way, right now, we're just looking, we're looking for people to say, yes, I'd be interested in doing that. And then in a way, we can figure out what that looks like. Because in that sense, it will very much look like what the people involved bring to it, and then where we want to go, and other member input, whatever. Sorry, somebody just asked a question, the rig system. Oh, I just mean that, and this is true of any institution. I'm not picking on institutional care. It's just that there's no leverage. The people who want to change those systems have no leverage, is what I'm basically saying, to be crass. In part because they don't have the money, and in a way, unless you can come up right now with a profitable solution, for the most part, the care system is controlled by people, as you say. There are alternatives. Don't get me wrong. I know the alternatives, Eden Alternative and others. They're not they're not the systems that most of our loved ones are going to go into. So I'm not at all dismissing that some people have come up with remarkably effective and caring and humanizing care. I think there's also, but that's all I meant, was that if you will, in real politic terms, if you want to transform a system, you better have a place for people to go to as an alternative, because you're asking people, and this is true of education, it's true of politics. So again, it's just it's just a question of how do you change it? But we don't have a lot of leverage by way of going directly to the owners and saying, oh, please change this system. In the ways that I think I'm not talking about adding 3 more staff, although again, I'm supportive of all these things, but we're not talking about adding 3 more staff, or, maybe adding an art therapy program, all of which would be important. But even to get those things, sadly, it takes quite a bit. You'd think I would be happy if those were kind of willingly, but even those aren't particularly willingly offered. So that's what I hope that's clear, but that's what I was talking about. Other people, again, may not agree. So others, let's hear from thoughts, feelings, questions. Share more about what you're doing, because again, I know many of you, but many of you don't know each other. So if nothing else, just introduce yourselves.
I can if no one else will go.
Go.
So my name is Mason. This is actually only my second time attending a meeting.
Ah,
I work at a university, so I have a very odd schedule that I can't always attend these meetings, but
yes.
I do keep track on the social
Oh, good.
media of what everyone's doing.
Oh, good.
I am a researcher in the field of dementia, specifically in social gerontology, so around the social inclusion and mental health around dementia and community inclusion. So a lot of the work that I do that kind of aligns nicely with the coalition is bringing people from the community living with dementia and long-term care together to do social activities in public settings. So taking like the bus systems that are already existing and working with them to navigate the bus systems and going to places in the community where other people are. So they're not just doing a bus trip on long-term care bus to some special place and then going back to their bus trip back to kind of interact with the community. So I do a lot of work in there as well as around music and arts kind of with people living with dementia. So I'm very interested in the coalition and trying to make sure the work I do matches the, as you say, the fringe stuff and is meaningful, but I'm only one
Yeah.
person.
Well, that's wonderful. No, please. Well, and you're not. See, because I think that's, and again, I don't want to become unduly philosophical, but we're all one person and we're also part of, and in a way that's in real life activity is what I hope we can just continue making a dent in 2025 and beyond is, hey, you're also part of it. And we're here if you can be as big as you want to be. Now, again, we all have limitations, but you're not alone. And I don't mean that in some, I mean, I'm fine to be touchy-feely, but literally you are not alone. And you can, and so I would love to give people license to maybe do some things, have an activity, host a conversation, bring us into it, invite me to come. It's fine, we'll support it in whatever way, but you're really not on your own. And that's if there was a message, that's probably it. So thank you for sharing that. Rebecca, you look very spooky. Come on and introduce yourself. And thank you, Mason. And really, we can keep talking about that. Dorothy, why don't you go ahead since you have your hand up, but I still want Rebecca to come off and just
Yeah,
who she-
mine is a little bit different this year because as you know that I had to step out of my field. I'm an occupational therapist and always very involved in the arts with dementia. But this year I have volunteered to be a Zoom presenter for our People's Health Alliance, which is an alternative health alliance. And I got in touch with someone in the UK that looks into dementia recovery or reversal of symptoms. And for the first time, actually, I have been able to speak into people's lives that had the initial start of some form of dementia. And well, according to me, some of them didn't even have a diagnosis yet. And I was able to tell them what to improve from simple things like improving their, salt intake or fat intake. But other things that we have been doing as a couple, my husband and me, we changed our diet and we did much more grounding, much more in nature, all the things that people in residential settings can't do. And then one of the biggest things was to improve our sleep pattern, things that seem simple, but it took a couple of years to improve. And we both feel invigorated. We feel much younger since we followed we started out with semi-carnivore diet and now we're on carnivore diet. And these things, although they seems strange to people to tackle. I feel in my own body that I've got a few years back. So that for me is really important, and a message I can pass on to friends that start to feel that like they fizzled out, even detoxing and things like that. It's a total different direction of what I used to do, because I used to concentrate a lot on reducing the stress about dementia and going more into the arts because of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a new way for me of looking at it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's also, it feels like it's something that you've kind of, I mean, again, discovered or are working now to integrate more fully. And there are a lot of people out there who are grappling with similar things. And that's not by way of diminishing you. I think actually, if anything, in a way, it's similar to what we were talking about with Mason. I would love if we could facilitate some coming togethers of people who in fact are, again, there's almost nothing that isn't going on somewhere else. I mean, maybe there's something, but and for me, I don't know, I would just like to keep toppling the silos. I think we're just still unnecessarily siloed. And again, it'll happen as it can happen. And maybe there's some other things we need to do to affect and to kind of keep these silos. I'm open to suggestions. But thank you. It's wonderful work. And I'm glad it's having a very positive impact. Rebecca, you want to come on?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Hi. I will say my baby might start crying any minute, so I'll try to make it quick. That's also why the lights
Oh my
are so
God,
dim.
still have the baby?
Somehow there's
Oh,
still a
God.
baby.
Wow.
Yes. So I'm a speech language pathologist. I work in home health in New York right now. And then I also do like dementia education advocacy. And I am working on starting a nonprofit. I was late today. I'm so sorry, because I have been trying to get through to the New York State Office of whatever about my certificate of incorporation getting approved sooner. It's a whole thing. So my nonprofit is, I want to start a cafe that employs people who are living with dementia. And
wonderful.
this is something that I've been working towards for like a really long time. And I definitely, anyone who's interested in being a part of it, like absolutely reach out to me. I can put my contact information in the chat. But if it's, New York based, but it's something that I would hope could scale. And I do have some, I used to work in research, so I do have some like connections there in New York. So I'm hoping to do things there too. Sorry, my brain is a little bit off at this time, but
you've been dealing with New York State. That'll destroy you.
That'll get you every time. Yeah. So that is.
Well, actually, I want to plug just to share, and you can find this on our website. Well, actually, visit our website. There's some really lovely things there. But Rebecca and another coalition member for taking it to the streets, actually, for the second year in a row, actually really did go on the streets. They took a table that's Simon Queens, and they spoke to people. They invited people to speak with them about reimagining dementia, and they had Post-it notes, and they invited people to write, kind of just share whatever they wanted to share about dementia or their relationship. And then I guess it's your husband who's a musician. Is that my getting that right? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And they took it and created a song from those Post-it notes, and it's beautiful. really is. But and it's an example of just that kind of ordinary way. People can. It's just it's a different way of communing with people.
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
beautiful. What was the experience like? Just
I mean, it was easier, I will say, when we were in Manhattan last year. I feel like we had a more successful time. But yeah, I mean, it's always interesting that there are people who are really resistant at first, usually resistant because they have a person in their lives who either died or who is like currently living with dementia, and they are just they're like living the tragedy narrative, as we call it, right? So, and at first they often don't want to hear about alternatives, in part, especially if the person has died, that could be a really rough thing to hear, like, oh, it could have been like, and we're not saying like, oh, like you should have, we're certainly not saying that. We're just sort of trying to open up the conversation. And so a lot of it for me is sort of hearing the stories about their people. I always like to ask about not like the person, living with dementia, but just who the person was and or still is, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, so it was a lot of that, especially this year. But that's the thing, is like everyone you talk to definitely has a connection to dementia.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this is so important. And there were definitely people there was one man in particular who he initially was not interested in conversation. And then we talked to him for a while, Alice and I together, and then he ended up leaving and coming back towards the end and being like, this did actually like make me think about this differently. And that was really exciting. So that doesn't always happen, but it was very cool.
Yeah. I mean, this, as I said, I'm a community. I've spent more time on the streets talking to people than I care to count. And the thing I've learned over those years is it doesn't matter what you talk about. I think in a way, I think we're often overly concerned with, we've got to say the right thing or convey the right information or whatever. But I think what you and Alice did, and others in your respect, I think you invited people to have a conversation. You were curious. You responded to whatever they said. There wasn't, and that, don't underestimate the power of that. That's all I ask. And I'm saying this to everyone. It is powerful because we don't get invited a lot to share anything. Or if we do, you feel like, oh God, am I saying it the right way? But it doesn't really matter. That you were there, that you were talking about reimagining dementia, that I guarantee you it will impact far longer than I think you can. It really will. I mean, the reality is we don't know mostly the impact we're having on people. And I know, so I want to say that with love and support for all that you're doing and all that everyone else is doing. And now, any final words? We've come to the end, but if there is someone who wants to share anything.
I don't know how to raise my hand, so I'll just.
Okay, let me, sorry, let me let this person in and let her know, unfortunately, she's, hi, Orchidea, this is Mary. Unfortunately, we're just about to end. Whoops, maybe she jumped off. Oh, well. Anyway, so, Jackie, why don't you briefly close this out? I think, I think we're not going to go with the mute. Let's just end at this. Let's end with whatever Jackie has to say.
Well, that's a lot. Someone else can end it, but I'll just introduce myself real quick and thank Mary for creating space for me. I filled out a volunteer application. I had a friend kind of do some digging around because I am just at probably somewhat of the beginning of what Dorothy was talking about in terms of like trying to figure figure out what's going on with me. I stopped working about a year and 3 months ago. I've done nonprofit and organizing and activism for like 30 plus years. But I recently was running an organization that I founded, and I'm trying to figure out how to get back to work. So one of the things that jumped out at me is like, yes, there are a lot of things going on out there in the world, but like, I found you all. So, and it really matters. Both my parents died during the pandemic. My dad was in a nursing home, and I just had a lot of issues dealing with a nursing home. And I'm an advocate for, I do some work around institutionalization, prisons, and things like that. And the same part of the Department of Justice that regulates prisons is the same part that you would go to about nursing homes. I mean, it's just that bad. It's just that closed, and
Yeah.
the HIPAA things. And so I'm pretty traumatized. But when I sat down with Mary, like, I'm ready to volunteer. I'm ready to apply my skills with somebody who would just repeat things twice or just slow down a little bit. So, a lot of this has just been panic trying to even talk and get through the frustration of not being like I used to be. But Mary's like, what's your origin story? Or I forgot her opening question. I'm like, because I've got like all this nonprofit experience, and I have all these ideas like coalition building. I have different coalitions and groups, and there's lots of small groups can do so much, like really can do so much. And people can learn skills and be supported. And I'm just really excited. There's a lot of possibilities, but I'm just really grateful that Mary was whatever you're trying to become or embody, you did it with me, because I think if you like screened me as a volunteer and didn't kind of reroute some of what I was not trying to do, I wasn't trying to do anything, but like, I just really appreciate it. You actually did what you said you were doing.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I'm gonna, since and I think what you're saying is very important. So maybe what I'll leave you all with is, it's one of my favorite sayings from Ursula Le Guin, which I think is very relevant to what you're talking about, Jackie, is when she said, to be against something is to maintain it. We have to go somewhere new. And I think that I feel that very strongly. It is easy to be against things. And I don't mean easy, it's painful to be against things, because the things we are against deserve to be against. However, as a way forward, it's profoundly limited, because ultimately you are maintaining whatever that is. So let's keep working together and playing together, and we'll continue the best we can to go somewhere new. So we'll keep the conversation going, be in touch individually with each other. We'll get out some of the contact stuff that was in here. But thank you all. It's great, great, great to see you. And it just always makes me happy. So have a good rest of your days, weeks, months, and we will be in touch. Bye.